Yo, what's going on guys? It's Flox. Today I am finally back with another Diablo 4 video. It's been a little while, but I got around to trying out Season 4 just because I hadn't played for a while. And it's actually been pretty fun. I like a lot of the gear changes they did. There's some stuff I don't like, but I'm not going to get into all that. But anyway, so for this video, I'm going to be going over the build I've been playing for Season 4. I did play Barrage again this season. I jumped around between quite a few different variations of a build, but I eventually landed on just this build right here, which is a poison build. I also wanted to try a poison build because I hadn't really tried a poison build before. And I think the build's pretty good. I think you can pretty much clear most of the stuff in the game that you want to clear, like you can kill any of the Uber or Tormented bosses, no problem. Right now I'm up to tier 102 in the pit. Going any higher I think is going to require just me endlessly grinding for really good stats on my gear. Since I'm not really sure, there's just like an obscene amount of damage I could pick up from the skill tree, the Paragon, and my aspects. I think most of that stuff is pretty much min-maxed. I'm just missing stuff like masterworking to get boosts on specific stats that I'm looking for, which is just going to take a really long time, and I'm not sure if I'm going to dedicate the time to doing that just to be able to go higher into the pit. But I mean, if you're not really interested in pushing super high into the pit, the build's perfectly fine for everything else. You'll be able to farm with it, you'll be able to kill bosses with it, you'll be able to do like the lower levels of the pit to farm mats. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right into the details of the build. And please remember, if you guys enjoy the video, to comment down below, let me know, like the video, or subscribe for more content. Thank you. Alright guys, so the first thing we'll jump into is the skill tree, and I'll just briefly go over some choices that we're making here. So right now I'm in the build that I was using just to push up into the pit a little more. So I'll go over the skill tree for that first, and then there's a couple things you can change if you're just trying to kill some of the Uber or Tormented bosses. So I'll go over that also in a second. Alright, so to start we are playing Blade Shift. We're playing Blade Shift Barrage. We're doing a combo point build with close quarters combat. So I pretty much have the Cutthroat skill and then the Marksman skill. For Blade Shift, we are also running the primary Blade Shift, which is going to give us an extra 15% resistances to all elements. That's important for my build because right now I'm not capped. So essentially that is what I'm using to cap out on resistances. Whenever I have the buff up, all of these are going to be at 70 and I'm good to go on resistances. For Barrage, we're taking Vulnerable. This is pretty much just going to be your main source of Vulnerable for the build. Just taking our DR here with 1 point in siphoning, some damage, Shadow Step for stun break, dash for mobility, max Dark Shroud for our defensive. We're taking the crit chance, just our standard damage here. For Poison Trap, I'm playing this, and you want to play this if you're doing anything harder, like higher pit tiers or the Tormented or Uber bosses. But if you're farming, you're probably better off just taking this one to reset the cooldown on Poison Imbuement. Also, if you're farming, you don't really have to change that at all. Like, you could just stay with this if you really want to. That's just like an option there. Poison damage and Poison DR. Max Poison Imbue with the extra damage on crit. 3 points into Frigid. We have Innervate for energy, Alchemist for lucky hit, and then we are playing close quarters combat. Now for the bosses, you don't really need as much DR, so we can just drop a lot of the DR, and you also don't need Shadow Step. And what we can take instead is some movement speed. I find movement speed really helps for the bosses. We can just take some extra crit right here, and I swap the crit chance on Shroud over to movement speed. And that's really all I change for bosses. So I'll briefly go over now some of the more important choices in the Paragon board. So there is also like another variation of the Paragon board for Uber bosses, basically where we just drop a lot of DR that we probably don't need for more damage. However, you absolutely do not need to swap that just to kill the Tormented bosses. And for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to swap my whole board just for that, but I will include that board variation like in the link to the build planner. So you guys can see that if you are really interested in changing around the board. So to start for the board, our first glyph is Chip. We're just taking this mostly for the multiplied damage that it gives us. The next board is the Cheap Shot board. This is a very important board since we are playing close quarters combat. We are trying to boost as much damage to crowd controlled enemies as we can get. So that's why we're taking this here and this here. I also have efficacy on this board just to give us more damage to crowd control enemies. And the 20% multiplied increased potency for poison imbue, which is a very large damage boost. The next board is the No Witnesses board. We're basically just pathing through this board for a glyph, and we're getting some extra max life. The glyph on this board is Bane. This is a really solid glyph for poison builds. Going over to the next board, which is Tricks of the Trade. On this board we have Canny, which is very important for poison builds as well. It's an extra 10% multiplied. We are pathing down here to grab the node Tricks of the Trade. So this is basically just going to boost your Barrage by 25% since we're naturally using Cutthroat and Marksman skills. Just basically boost your damage for playing combo points. I'm just grabbing a little bit of DR from distant here as well as damage to distant. Over on the next board, this is the Exploit Weakness board. So on this board I have control. We are not really interested in the potion healing. I'm just taking the extra int down here. I think this is the board that has the most int out of all these. And this glyph is boosting our close quarters combat damage, so I'm trying to max this out as much as possible. And then the rest of the stuff is just pathing over to the legendary node. I'm grabbing a little bit of DR and armor here. The next board is, I believe, Leirana's Instinct, and this is just another pathing board where we're putting a glyph and going over to the next board. On this board we have the last glyph, which is Tracker, which is another solid glyph for poison builds. And then we path over to the last board, which is Eldritch Bounty, and we're just grabbing the legendary node there. But yeah, that's pretty much the Paragon board. Alright guys, so now we're going to get into the real meat and potatoes, which is the stats and the gear and the aspects. This is really what's going to make or break the build. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we are not really running any uniques right now, so it should be pretty easy to get all this stuff. As far as the aspects go, stats of course is always going to be a little bit of a pain. And just like with the skill tree and the Paragon board, there are a couple aspects you can change around for Uber bosses, just because you don't need as much defensive power for the bosses. So right now I am in the build for pushing into the pit, so I'll just go over everything, and then at the end I will go over what I change for Uber bosses. So starting off at the top here, we are running the Aspect Might. As far as these stats on your helmet go, you absolutely really need Poison Imbuement ranks, and I cannot stress that enough. That is very important for your damage. As far as your temperings go, and this is just in general for gear, for your defensive options, you just need to make sure you hit 9,230 armor. You need to make sure you cap your resistances. And then once you have your armor and your resistances, you're just looking to get as much life and dodge chance as you can. So right now I have 30% dodge chance. And then as far as the tempering for the utility, you either want the freeze or the stun. You want the freeze because it gives you access to a lot of extra damage through frigid. It's basically free access to frigid. It gives you extra damage with the control glyph. We are also running the noxious ice aspect here, so that gives us more damage to frozen enemies. And then you want the stun because similarly you get a damage boost from the control glyph if a target's stunned. And I'm also running the Choker Retribution, which gives an extra 45% damage to anything that's stunned. So basically for all of your pieces of gear on the utility temper, you just want to make sure you're either rolling freeze or stun. Going down to the chest piece, I'm running the enshrouding aspect. And then the very important thing you want to make sure you get on here is the either ranks to subterfuge skills or ranks to dark shroud specifically. Either of those will give you extra ranks to your dark shroud, which is really, really important for being able to survive. Gives you a lot of extra defensive value. On the gloves, I think these are basically the stats you want. You want crit, lucky hit, and ranks to barrage. You need lucky hit for Umbrus, and you need lucky hit for bursting venoms. Bursting venoms is basically the most important thing for your damage, and you need this to proc as often as possible. So you want to be able to boost lucky hit as often as possible. Also, what I forgot to mention for the helmet, if you can get lucky hit on your helmet, absolutely do. I would probably drop maybe like max life here or dexterity, but if you can get lucky hit and ranks to poison imbuement, that'd be very, very good. And then as far as the temperings on the gloves go, for the damage one, you want the damage to crowd controlled enemies. That's very important because that boosts your close quarters combat damage. And then for the aspect, I'm running concussive strikes. The daze helps reduce your damage intake by a lot, especially in the higher pit tiers. And then also on top of that, you get an extra little bit of damage to anything that's dazed. This also works when bosses are staggered, so you get an extra 19% damage while bosses are staggered. Also helps stagger bosses a little bit faster, which is pretty cool. On the pants, we are running Umbrus. And then I think as far as stats go on the pants, just mainly look for stuff to fill in the defensive holes that you're missing. Same thing for boots, more or less. You just want to look for stats to fill the defensive holes you're missing. Now for the weapons, I like to have max life on all the weapons, especially for higher tiers of the pit. Max life is pretty good. Dex just gives you damage for everything, so Dex is pretty good too. And then I do have a little bit of resource cost reduction built into my build. Right now my Barrage is at 17 energy. You do want a little bit of resource cost reduction, otherwise you will run out of energy because I'm not running any aspects for energy. So you do need some. I would try to get Barrage like to around where I have it right now, like maybe like 17, 18 energy cost. That's more or less like the sweet spot. I don't really run out of energy ever at this energy cost. And then as far as the temperings go, you really, really want crowd control and then the extra barrage projectiles. Super important. Both give you a lot of damage. And then for the aspect on the bow, I am running corruption. This gives you an obscene amount of damage to your poison imbue. So you definitely want to put that on the weapon. On the swords here, pretty much more or less the same thing. You want to look for like Dex, max life, and then like any type of damage that fits the build. So just like regular damage or damage over time. And then same thing for the temperings. You want damage to crowd controlled, and then the extra chance for barrage projectiles. For the aspect on this one, I have expectant. On this sword, I'm running high velocity aspect to give you extra barrage attack speed and barrage pierces. This is really important for the build because when stuff is clumped up, if you don't have this aspect, it can become really, really hard to hit stuff. Also, the piercing gives you extra hits for bursting venoms procs and umbrus procs. So it helps to smooth out some of your lucky hit chances. And then stats, like I mentioned, same thing. Just you want damage to crowd control, barrage projectiles. And then for the weapon gems, we are running extra damage over time. On your rings, you want crit and lucky hit. And then your third stat can just be like anything to fill. So like something that might help the build, like damage over time, resource cost reduction, max life. For temperings, you want at least one extra poison imbue cast. So in this one I have +2 casts per poison imbue. That is very important because you need extra casts to smooth out the bursting venoms proc chance. The more casts you have, the more chances you have to proc bursting venoms. And then basically once bursting venoms procs, you're good to go. So you want to have at least one piece of jewelry with the extra imbue casts on it. And then for the aspect we have bursting venoms, which is just going to give you infinite poison imbues. On this ring, same thing, you just want crit lucky hit. And then I have resource cost reduction, damage to crowd controlled enemies, and then a little bit more resource cost reduction. For this aspect we are running elements, which gives you both physical and poison damage, which we use both of. And then for the neck piece, I like to have crit on the neck piece. I think you probably really need crit on the neck piece. Ranks of Frigid is probably one of the best passives you can get. You can probably drop that resource cost reduction, the 7.1, if you can find like something with like extra ranks to another passive on it. I don't think you really need that 7.1 resource cost reduction. And then we have damage to crowd controlled enemies, and I have more resource cost reduction down there. And then for this aspect, we are also running Retribution. Now for the Uber bosses, I'll go over what you can change out. Basically, we don't need as much defensives, so you can swap out Might, and instead what you can put here is you can move the concussive strikes from here over to your helmet. So you have a helmet with concussive strikes. On the gloves, that means you can put another offensive aspect. A good one for bosses is intercom, so you can just throw that on your gloves. And then the other thing you don't need is high velocity. You don't really need this for bosses. And instead what you can throw on there is Edge Masters, be pretty good. So you're really only swapping out 3 aspects if you're really trying to min-max damage for the Uber bosses. So I think that covers everything important to know as far as the build. We went over the skills, the gear, the stats, the aspects, and the Paragon Board. Basically, right now what I'm going to do is I will play over my Uber Lilith kill, my Tormented Duriel and Andariel kills, and then I'll also throw in like a Pit tier 100 run, just so you guys can see what the build looks like and how it plays. But like I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm not sure how much more I'm going to push into the pit, just because it's starting to feel like I just need to really grind for like near perfect stats on gear, which is just going to take a really long time. And there's other stuff going on that I'm doing, so I don't really know if I'll have the time to do it. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about the build, if you liked it, what you've been playing for Season 4. I'd love to hear it, all that stuff. And remember, if you guys enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment down below and let me know. And other than that, guys, I will see you all in the next video.